Namaste and welcome viewers. You're watching India Tonight. I'm Ashish, Pareek, joined by my colleague Sumita, Kareer. We're getting you the show live from our Delhi studio. At the top of the hour, we'll talk about politics and the repercussions that it's resulting in across the nation when it comes to the financial condition of states. The National Democratic Alliance's landslide victory in Bihar has once again cast a spotlight on the role of freebies in elections, especially in India. Just ahead of the elections, Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the Mukhyamantri Mahila Rozgar Yojana, promising 10,000 rupees in cash transfers to women in Bihar to make women Atmanirbhar and promote women's empowerment through self-employment and livelihood opportunities. Under this scheme, the Prime Minister transferred 10,000 rupees to bank accounts of 75 lakh women, totaling 7,500 crore. And incidentally, all of this happened just before the elections. Chief Minister Nitish Kumar also then transferred 10,000 to 21 lakh women, totaling 2,100 crore. In total, 9,600 crore rupees was transferred to the accounts of lakhs of women just before the elections.
But you know what? The recent trends are suggesting that the state's fiscal deficits have risen significantly, and not just the state of Bihar, but several other states that have doled out freebies ahead of polls. The fiscal deficits of those states have risen significantly between the pre-election year and the year after the election. In fact, the fiscal deficit of Chandigarh rose from 1% to 3.9%, Karnataka from 1.7% to 3.1%, and that in Madhya Pradesh rose from 3.3% to 4.7%. Now, overall, the average fiscal deficit of 10 states rose from 2.5 to 3.5%, and that's some research which has been put together by MK Research. In fact, those are some of the graphics that we're bringing you as far as these states are concerned. These states' fiscal deficits are increasing. So the big question that we're asking tonight on the show, are freebies then a time-ticking bomb, and do they actually favor voters when fiscal deficits of these states are rising? And of course, will these states then be able to deliver on the promises? In fact, to discuss that and more, I'm now joined in by Rajani Sinha. She's the Chief Economist, CareEdge Group. Also joining us on this broadcast live is Mr. Sanjeev Srivastava. He's a political commentator. Thank you very much, Mr. Srivastava and Rajani, for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET Now. Let me come to you, Rajani, first, and that essentially is the question that we are asking, that when states are doling out these freebies which create fiscal deficit for those states, and of course these are financially unviable schemes, so how do they actually favor voters, or do they actually favor voters in the longer run at all?
So, Sumita, freebies are not a new thing for India, and for that matter, I would say globally. These have been used in the past also by political parties to kind of garner votes. Now, if I look at the fiscal implication of this, yes, it is concerning because it's happening at a time when, anyways, state government finances are not in a very good shape. Like you just said, for FY25, it's already, estimated the aggregate state fiscal deficit is estimated at around 3.2% of GDP, higher than the 3% limit. And for FY26 also, it's budgeted at around 3.2%. So to that extent, yes, it is concerning. And in fact, we had done an analysis of the freebies, the direct cash transfers that has been announced by several states in the last 4-5 years. And we looked at some 10 states, including West Bengal, Bihar, Jharkhand, Orissa, Tamil Nadu. And what we found is that in total, they have given out freebies amounting to around 1.5 trillion. And as a percentage of their revenue received, an average of around 7% of their revenue receipt of these 10 states have gone into freebies, which is very concerning because that leaves lesser amount for other more development related expenditure. So, and this, especially for some states like Bihar, the fiscal deficit is at a very high of around 5.7%. Some of the other states also, like Punjab, Rajasthan, this 3.2% is aggregate. But if I look specifically at some states like Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Punjab, Rajasthan, the fiscal deficit is higher than 4% of GDP. Their debt, the state government debt for some of these states, it's around 30% or so, even higher, around 40% for some of the states like Punjab. So it is concerning that these freebies are being given at a time when some of these states already their finances are not in a good shape.
Absolutely, Rajniji, that's the biggest problem. The fact that, RBI has officially named 12 states at a fiscal risk, but the reality is all of these states continue to dole out subsidy after subsidy. Sanjeev Srivastava, where does this take us? And also, what's the logical end to this? Because the reality is once one party promises free power or water, the competitors have to match it or they eventually end up losing elections. Now, for example, Rajasthan reverted to the old pension scheme, adding massive liabilities. Punjab then did the same. Himachal also did the same. Is this now a political death spiral where no one can stop the spending without actually approving or agreeing to a political suicide?
So, very good evening. And what my fellow panelist, Ms. Sinha, was just saying, she is, of course, a much better master of data and numbers than I am. But what is very clear is that we had this scenario till a couple of years back, I think, when the Prime Minister himself was against the Revdi culture and he went to town talking about it, that how it is going to be so detrimental to Indian economy. And like Ms. Sinha just pointed out, like if we take, for example, the case of Bihar, where 7% is the deficit, or 7% of your revenue receipts are being just given out in doles, then what kind of progress can you expect? Now, if we just take the case of Bihar, I've been traveling there since the mid 90s. So since the mid 90s to 25, about 35 years of travel, every election I go there. This time also. So one saw a lot of progress there between 2005 and 15 in Nitish's first 10 years as chief minister. And the last 10 years, again, it's the same story. Per capita is stagnating. Freebies are ruling the roost. And this kind of freebies is precisely the reason because this money should have been rightfully spent on development projects, infrastructure, things which should have had a cascading effect or a multiplier effect on the economy, created more jobs, created a better sense of well-being, better economy, better fiscal health. But that's not happening because you have a limited pie. If you spend it on freebies, then where do you go? And that is precisely the reason, as one of my friends and fellow travelers on these election trips, well-known global investor and thinker Ruchir Sharma, continuously points out and has recently written also in FT that that's why India can only think or we can only be feel good about sometimes somewhere doing something like a China. But China had ruthless capitalism. During the decades where it hit 9-10% growth, there was no freebie culture. And that is why we are forever consigned to this 5.5, 6.5% kind of terrain or somewhere in between. And that is why we can dream big, but we can never achieve big till we let go of the freebie culture, till we optimize our resources, till we decide to put them to optimum use. This is not the optimum use. But when winning elections is more important, you can keep talking about nation first, but winning elections takes precedence over everything else for all parties. And BJP is no exception. In that case, we can kiss that kind of growth goodbye. We can talk about it. Even this debate should have happened when the Bihar freebie was announced, not after that it is done and dusted.
We did, Mr. Srivastava. Mr.
I'm
Srivastava,
sure I did.
in fact, through this entire year, and in fact, whenever the elections have happened,
yes,
we have.
I
know that collectively the media also should have these kind of discussions.
Across the media, who is talking about it? Who is raising a UN cry? And in any case, one is raising UN cry, even if they do, it's after the horses have probably bolted.
Right. Right. Absolutely. But Mr. Srivastava, let me ask a follow-up question. When you say that, who is questioning, we did hear from the Supreme Court earlier this year, it drew a red line on freebies. And in fact, it also said that we're not really creating jobs for people, but we're creating a class of parasites. That is something I do remember created a lot of controversy. But the point essentially is that who is going to bell the cat, and will SC keep intervening? Because there has to be a stop somewhere as far as these freebies are concerned, or propagating this culture of freebies is concerned, because eventually it's not going to work for anyone.
So, sorry to say that, but certain statements are more for the sake of optics. Have they issued any contempt of court? Have they hauled any senior functionary of the government, or can they do it? Is it within their domain? No, I think that's the policy making is a government domain. Supreme Court or any other apex court can comment and pontificate, but it's precious little that they can do about it. Till there is a system in place which says, because I honestly, through my travels in Bihar, actually felt without the 10,000 rupee scheme, everybody is talking about it as a game changer. I personally felt maybe their margins would not have been this kind of a sweep as we have got in the final outcome, but they would have still won. But because there is this play safe tendency, because there is this tendency to win at any cost, because there is this belief to not to close or plug all possible gaps, then you end up in this kind of a situation where it is now competitive populism. And competitive populism only helps for a short run. Imagine what kind of a third, fourth largest economy we talk about when 80 crore of our people are given free ration every day. Is that the state of the world's when we take pride or talk about competing with the world's best? That is the truth of the of the story. So we have a lot of catching up to do, and this is not the path through which one can do that catching up.
Absolutely. In fact, I'll take that point across to Rajani Sinha. Rajani ji, one of the reports that I was reading pointed to the fact that state-owned power companies lost 68,832 crore rupees in 2022-23 alone due to free power schemes. Yet, despite this, all of these states keep adding more and more freebies with every passing election instead of actually fixing tariffs or even bringing about some sort of fiscal efficiency. How do you explain this self-destruction? And again, like Sumita also asked, who's going to build the cat? Because eventually we look at all of these manifestos and just a single look and you know that it's not fiscally viable, yet nobody acts on it. Who is going to build the cat, and also who is going to decide that all of these parties are being held accountable?
While we are talking about this concern about freebies being announced and what's going to be the implication of that on state government finances, we are concerned that for some of these states, the debt is very high. The interest payment burden, uh, as a percentage of receipt, some of these states like Punjab, around 25% is going just in interest payment. And so is the case with some other states like Bihar, where it's as high as interest payment burden is as high as 20%. So yes, it is a cautious picture that we are creating. But at the same time, I would like to highlight some positive aspects also. We were looking at this data on what's happening to capital outlay by states, capital expenditure by states in the last few years. And what we find is that as a percentage of GDP, the capital expenditure by states between FY21 to FY24 has grown from around 2.1% of GDP. This I'm talking about state GSDP to around 2.45%, 2.4% of GSDP by FY24. So the point I'm highlighting is that it's not a very dismal picture completely. States are focusing on capital outlay also. And specifically, given that we are talking about Bihar, I would like to highlight that Bihar in the last 2-3 years has been recording very good GDP growth. Now you can, debate and argue that it's on a low base, but yes, the point is that they have been recording GDP growth of around 8 to 12%. And interestingly, there is good capex happening in the economy. In fact, I was looking at the CMI data on investment projects completed in FY25 and what's the status in FY26. And we find that the of all the investment projects completed in India, Bihar had a share of around 5.8%, as against, say, 1.8%, which they had 5 years back. So the point that I'm trying to highlight is that capital expenditure in Bihar is also improving. And this, when I'm talking about capital expenditure, it's mainly going in infrastructure projects. And it is supported by center, state, and by private parties too. So Even while we are concerned about these freebies, let's also make a note that everything is not a very gloomy picture. States are also spending on capex, though not at the rate at which ideally we would like to see.
A quick follow-up question there, Rajni ji. Of course, you're talking about the fact that the states are definitely spending when it comes to capex, and there is a lot of growth happening as well. But the reality is, between 2013 and 14, between 2013, 14, and 22, 23, the combined state debt has tripled from 17.5 lakh crore to 59.6 lakh crore. This year alone, 19 states have crossed 30% debt to GSDP. How do you reverse this debt spiral? Because the reality is, like Sumita also pointed out, the Supreme Court itself has come out and pointed out that we are creating a class of parasites. RBI also has given a warning about how this entire subsidy freebie culture is just unsustainable. The reality is, at the end of the day, regardless of what they are spending, they are accumulating a lot of unproductive debt, which at the end of the day, it will be for the voters to bear.
Yeah, absolutely. Ashish, I agree with the point that you're highlighting. If I look at an aggregate level, state debt has increased to around 29% of GSDP, which is concerning. And like I mentioned, around 20% of their revenue receipt is going into interest payment, which shows that there's very little left for other expenditure. And again, if I look at the kind of outgo that is going for non-development expenditure, that has also increased. Like I mentioned, for some of these states, these 9, 10 states that have announced freebies in the last 4, 5 years, the average outgo for them is around 7% of their revenue receipt. Say for Bihar, right now, the freebies that they have announced, it would amount to around 10% of their revenue receipt. So yes, there is no denying that yes, this aspect is concerning, and it is going to put pressure on overall general government debt. So even if the center continues to do fiscal consolidation, and in fact we are expecting that center will be able to reduce government debt going forward in the next 5 to 10 years, but yes, there will be pressure on state government debts, and that is concerned.
Rajni, then let me ask you a follow-up question. So at what point is a state technically bankrupt? Because if you look at some data, for instance, in Punjab alone, power subsidies have cost 6,700 crores annually, with free agriculture power adding another potential 14,337 crores. Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh and West Bengal each spent over 20% of revenue on subsidies.
So, yes, Sumita, absolutely. For
Rajni, would
some
you
of
answer
these
that?
states, some of these states, like you mentioned, for say for Punjab, Rajasthan, for that matter, even Bihar, the government finances are in a very difficult shape. And going forward, this is going to put further pressure. Like I said, the debt is increasing. For Punjab, it's as high as 40% of their GSDP. So that kind of interest payment is going to go out of their coffers. So it's definitely going to put pressure. And yes, the concerning aspect is that we don't know where is the end to this. Because what has been happening is that looking at few states doing it, we are expecting that it's quite possible that more and more states will emulate something like this going forward. So yes, this will definitely put a lot of pressure on state government finances, and we don't know how high can the fiscal deficit for some of these states go in that case.
Absolutely. In fact, a quick follow-up question there. Let's in fact go across to Mr. Srivastava. Mr. Srivastava, a lot of the states' own tax revenue is stuck at 7% of the GSTP. This is exactly where it was a decade ago. Yet expenditure keeps rising. This, in fact, the problem is this is not just a cyclical issue; it's a structural failure when it comes to the way these states are managing their finances. Shouldn't political campaigns in a way focus on why can't we grow revenue faster? Shouldn't voters look at all of these factors in a manifesto instead of actually looking at who's giving us the most money? Because at the end of the day, like Rajniji is also pointing out, it is going to lead us to a point where it's going to be a point of no return. What do we do then? Because no state on its own is going to be able to bail out the country.
So, since we are discussing Bihar in such detail, and I'm thankful to Rajani Sinha for showing us the other side of the picture. I'm a great believer in seeing both sides. And I also appreciate the fact that in a country where we have such a large number of poor, it's 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 really not possible, and it's not proper also to completely rubbish freebies of things like free ration. Having said that, let's take the case of Bihar. Just the interest burden of what their current state of debt is comes to upwards of 60 crores per day. Imagine 60 crores, more than 60 crores per day. Their per capita income of an average Bihari is less than 70,000 rupees per year, which is, and if you compare that to Telangana, which is upwards of 2 lakhs, you see, there's a gap of 70-30 gap. So while you can't blame the people to expect freebies, don't expect the voter who is in any case so poor or a majority constituents of such poor people or needy people to expect them to take the lead and ask the political parties not to give them doles. It's for the political parties to focus their priorities right. How to improve the living conditions, how to get better industry, how to boost economy of a state, so that these conditions over a period of time change, wherein one sees no focus in that. And that is the
Absolutely.
truth of the matter, because it's now Bihar has proven it's a very easy fix. You just a few weeks before the elections announced a big cash transfer scheme, and thanks to Aadhaar, it will be done very speedily, and there'll be no middleman. That's the thankfully some saving grace in this entire setup, and your deed is
Right.
done. It's
Right.
very difficult to now
Right.
undo this course, and who will take that lead? Who will build the cat? We can keep discussing. I don't see anybody building
Absolutely.
that cat.
No, so Mr. Srivastava, you've made a very, very valid point, very important point, that instead of giving freebies, because poor voters are going to come and claim these freebies, they're not going to say no, given the fact that, their living conditions are quite deplorable. There are not enough jobs in the country. So the big task ahead of all of these political parties is to first fix the conditions, first the economy of all of these states. But I'll come back to another point that you made about belling the cat. Whose responsibility is it, and how do we ensure that there is a stoppage to this? Because the Supreme Court did take suo moto action, but we're still seeing all political parties going hammer and tongs after freebies. Is it the job of the election commissioner, and can the election commission be forced to be held accountable as far as stopping these political parties from wasteful spending as far as that is concerned?
No, at least I don't live in a, well, sorry to use the expression, I don't live in a fool's paradise. In a
Utopian
country
world.
where the 10,000 rupees are being transferred even while the voting is on in first phase and in the second phase.
Right.
I'm sorry, this show is not meant for that, I'm sure. But do you really expect the election commission can't even enforce the model code of conduct? You think anybody will interfere?
But sir, we can't just keep going on. We can't keep going on with pressure being put on state
Sumita,
coffers.
It is, if any one party has the credibility or the people's support, right now it is the central government, the BJP government, BJP-led NDA government. They need to build a cat. They need to take that initiative rather than succumbing to competitive populism. They need to make sure that we are on the right track. And so I think that's where the debate should end. That who is going to build the cat? I don't know who will, but it is the government's job to build the cat.
Absolutely, Mr. Srivastava, that's the biggest question here. Who's going to build the cat? The problem is, we live in a nation where it's extremely opportunistic, and it's also extremely
Because
subjective as to what is considered a welfare. On one hand, while the Prime Minister calls something a rave D, on the other hand, someone else calls it a khatakat scheme. So the problem is everyone tries to justify what they're trying to do without actually, focusing on the real issue. And we'll, of course, keep talking about it. There are many more elections lined up, and I'm pretty sure there are many more such announcements, freebies, subsidies also lined up, which will drain our coffers, state coffers of a lot of money.
And I think, Ashish, just On the issue of pollution, we keep doing discussions, we keep outraging. We will continue to do these panel discussions on freebies and how these are, sort of putting pressure on the state's coffers.
Absolutely. We'll, of course, see if it actually leads to anything. But meanwhile, Rajani Sinha and Sanjeev Srivastava, it's an absolute pleasure speaking to you. And, of course, understanding more about this fiscal suicide, as we call it, when it comes to freebies that are announced just before the elections. And viewers, on that note, it's time for a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.